Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for taking interest in learning more about the detection dog methodology. Today we'll be talking about the foundation of detection dog work, which includes the dogs, the humans, and the application. My name is Susie. I studied at Penn State University with a Bachelor of Science in Ecology. I am a co-founder of Rogue Detection Teams. I've worked on 36 different projects doing detection dog work. I love sharing Rogue's adventures with K through 12 students in an education program that we're setting up. And I like my funky dancing. Things I hate is crawling through thorns. I've done enough of it in the field. I think it's time for someone else to do it. This is Sky. She's one of the detection dogs that we have in our program, and she studied at the Santa Fe Humane Society in playing ball. She is a co-founder of Pangolin Scat Detection, and she's trained on 15 targets. Her favorite thing in the world is the ball, and her second favorite thing is crawling into people's sleeping bags. She hates my dancing, no joke. She barks at me when I do it. And she also hates crawling through thorns. So she's been my primary sidekick for about 5 years now. Rogue Detection Teams was established in 2019 with a mission to bring the conservation detection dog method to the forefront of scientific research. And we do that by providing knowledgeable field teams. While the program is budding, we have a combined experience of 60 years in the detection dog methodology field. So what does the conservation detection dog method really mean? Well, Sky and I are a detection team with Rogue that offers researchers a way to sniff out answers. If a biologist wants to learn about cougar populations by analyzing their scat, I can teach Sky to find cougar scat over a large landscape. If tree growers need to learn if a tree is diseased, I can teach Sky to alert to it in the tissue of the leaves. If a wind facility needs to find out how many mortalities are occurring at a wind farm, I can teach Sky to sniff out bird and bat carcasses. We survey different environments for a specific target that will help researchers answer their scientific questions. So that sounds simple and beautiful, right? Well, there's a whole world behind using dogs in a conservation setting. But first, let me explain a bit more of the foundation, and for simplicity's sake, we're going to be focusing on scat work for the majority of today's talk. First things first, why dogs? What makes this method so powerful? Can't we just look for scats ourselves? We can, but using dogs actually gives us an advantage. And well, we asked cats, do you want to play ball to save wildlife? But they weren't as eager to please. Simply put, a dog's eager to please and their heightened sense of smell is an amazing piece of technology. Humans have 5 million olfactory receptors or smell receptors. Dogs have 250 million olfactory receptors. So you've heard of dogs detecting the coronavirus, cancer, and drugs that are even smuggled within gasoline containers. So they can find scat in a complex environment. They're really efficient. The dogs can cover large landscapes over a short period of time. Typically, our dogs walk twice the distance we do during our surveys. They're effective. Scat is everywhere. There's deer, bear, grouse, marmot, pika, but they aren't alerting to it all. They have learned that we only want one type. They are unbiased. Through visual surveys for scats, humans will only find the obvious samples, ones that are right in front of them. With dogs, odor can permeate the environment, which means they can find samples off a road, in tall grass, up a tree, even underground. This means they are finding individuals that may want to pass through a territory undetected, which then provides a more complete sampling effort. They're multi-sniffers. What do I mean by that? They can alert to multiple odors at the same time. So if a biologist is interested in learning about the interactions in an ecosystem and they want to specifically learn about cougar, bear, and coyote, we can ask the dogs to alert to all three of those species during one project. And lastly, they are adaptable. As long as the game is present, the dogs can learn new search patterns, key into certain environments, pinpoint tiny targets, even invisible ones, and they can even work on water. So I'm going to show you how our dogs work by displaying some of my sick Wes Anderson animation skills. But before I do, I want to explain a scenario here and specifically define a scent cone and what the dog will be doing. So a scent cone is an imaginary cone-shaped area that begins at the source of the odor, in this case, one of the scats. The cone represents the space that the scent travels along the breeze or with the air. So we have the wind coming in from a northerly direction, and we have red cougar that walked this little dotted red line and dropped 2 little pieces of brown ware and continued on. Then we have a green scat over here from cougar B or cougar green. So hunting dogs follow the scent of an animal, typically with their nose to the ground and tracking. So they might follow that red line. By doing so, you spend a large majority of the time following one individual and not focusing on finding a sample from multiple individuals. So when we're out there, we are not tracking the animal. By using point source detection dogs, they're able to move freely through the environment and find targets from multiple individuals. So here Jack sits, he gets his ball, then we continue on. And we search that ridge line if it's cougar, because that's where they're likely to defecate. Again, Jack finds another odor cone, and he gets his ball. So as the dog moves through the environment, it's the human's job to identify niche habitat for a specific animal, like I mentioned with a ridge and cougar, be aware of possible danger, observe what the odor in the environment is doing, and interpret the dog's behavior if they're having difficulty working into a scent cone. So now I'm going to knock out the most popular question or set of questions. What kind of dog are you looking for? Can my dog do this? How long does it take to train a dog? What's the best reward for a detection dog? Every detection dog program is different, but at Rogue, it's this simple. Do they have a high drive to play fetch? I'm talking loose wire, nutty, must have it or I'll die, where is it kind of drive. I'll show you a few examples, but I put Rogue Beckett up here to show that he doesn't need to look like a Malinois or a Lab or a Spaniel. This drive is apparent in so many different shapes, sizes, and breeds of dogs, but this drive is fairly rare. So other than a high drive to play fetch, as long as they are physically sound to do this work, they may travel up to 30 kilometers in a day, and they need a job, which means maybe they're not getting adopted from a shelter because of this drive, because they're so incessant. A lot of people think, I don't want a dog like that, and that's okay. Some families make it work. Other families are looking for a companion to chill out on the couch. So if this dog needs a purpose, then they're going to be great for Rogue, and we can make a team. So overall, generally speaking, dogs can be deployed in about 15 days. They get the game, and I'll talk about that later. So here's an example of Captain's Drive, a dog that actually came from an amazing family that knew they couldn't keep up with his drive. His owner was even training for a marathon and took him out on all the runs, but you see his eyes are dilated. So Nelson, who came from a shelter in Minnesota, has a different drive. He's still object focused, but his favorite object is a metal dish. Even with the high drive mindset, the dogs require clear communication to do this work. And that's where the true secret weapon, it's the human. When I started this work, I could watch a team working in the field and think, whoa, that shelter dog looks like a $20,000 working dog. The moment I was given the ball, that dog slowly exhibited behaviors that made me think, oh, I broke this dog. But what I've learned is that when you watch a dog truly shine in the work they do, it's the bounder who seems like they're doing nothing that creates an exceptional team. So what a lot of people think is that becoming a detection dog handler is a cool job to try, but it isn't as casual as you might think. There are studies upon studies out there that try to identify what the best breed, age, drive of the dog is needed for this work. But there aren't many studies on what breed of human is really fit for this work. Now, this is an opinion of mine, which really holds no scientific value, but I think the core of what we do is dependent on curiosity, communication, and creativity. We learn how to work with all of the dogs in the program. We learn how to read the wind. We learn about our target species or odor. Being able to problem solve, but look at it from another perspective, this perspective of the dog or the target, is what starts creating that exceptional edge. So a lot of people think I hike through amazing spaces with my dog and I just get to have the time of my life. Well, you're right. But along with that comes crawling, adapting, and reassessing. This work is so demanding, and you make a lot of sacrifices by being on the road, through the holidays, through all sorts of weather, and during weird hours. So you have to be adaptable to changes, and you kind of have to have no life. You're constantly traveling with a dog, which is definitely easier than having a kid because you can't put them in a crate if needed. But this dog is your job. If anything happens to their well-being, you're out of that project. The biggest perk of this work is that I can eat whatever I want because I'm constantly trying to keep up with a four-legged goofball that just wants to find a target and play. So being physically sound is important to be able to do the field work. So a lot of you may still be wondering, well, why would a dog do this? A lot of folks like to tell me, oh, my dog loves to find poop, but then rolls in it or eats it. So why would our dogs want to sniff out a certain species of scat for 8 hours a day? Do they get paid well? No, not really. The knack of this work is to make sure the dogs never realize they're working. This methodology is based around our dog's favorite drive, which is to play fetch, that we creatively call the game. The basic foundation is to emphasize that the target equals the ball. So target equals ball. Scat equals ball. Maybe a carcass equals ball. We place the scat out and let the dogs do what they're born to do. They sniff around, they check out the new smell. The moment their nose hovers over that scat, boom, the ball magically appears. So we do that over and over and over and over and over until the dogs are like, whoa, check out this magic poop. Every time I sniff it, my ball appears. So now they're eager to find that poop so they can play ball. So during a survey day, they may get that ball over 200 times. And guess what? The 200th time is just as good as the first time. At some points, they'll even drop the ball to go find another scat as you're collecting a scat. And they look at you saying, okay, come on over, I found another one. So honestly, as long as the dog is happy, well taken care of, and loves his job, it doesn't matter if it's a ball reward or a kibble reward. But it's important to recognize if you want your dog to do this work, it has to love, and I mean love, either that toy or that piece of kibble. We can do this work for up to 10 hours in a day, month after month, year after year, and for them, it doesn't get old. We look for those dogs that are obsessed with playing balls, and again, it's very difficult for them to find a home. We've had a dog that had the reputation that when you put the ball on top of the refrigerator, they stare at them for 6 hours because they know their ball is there. So again, that drive is so high that it may result in destructive behavior or reactivity, and that's what makes this such a perfect outlet because they get to play ball and really put in some high miles doing this work. So once the dogs understand the association between when I find what the human shows me, I get to play ball, then switching out a target odor can be pretty straightforward. So we've talked a bit about scat, and your initial thoughts might be poop. Well, why in the world do researchers want to find poop? Well, scat can provide an extensive amount of information to a researcher. It's also a non-invasive way to study wildlife, which means we don't have to bring the animal to an area or even see the animal. We're walking through the woods, picking up what they've left behind on their normal behavior. So first things first, We can tell their diet, obviously. And from that, we can see what is in there and what habitat requirements that animal needs to be able to survive. We can also identify the location. Is the animal dispersing? What's their home range like? We can extract, and by we, I mean geneticists, not rogue, can extract DNA to confirm the species, identify the sex, and even identify the individual that scat came from. With that information, we can tell the population size, and we can start looking at occupancy and abundance for those populations. Last, you can find toxins like persistent organic pollutants, PCBs or DDTs, that are present in the environment. And you can also identify hormones within the scat. So as long as the scat is preserved correctly, you can extract stress, reproduction, and nutrition hormones from that scat about that individual. So when it comes to using dogs in a conservation setting, the possibilities are quite extensive. For scat, we have worked with over 40 different types of wildlife duties. From the smallest, looking at caterpillar scat, which is the size of a pepper flake, all the way up to whale scat, which, yes, it floats, and it can be the size of a dinner plate. From there, as long as we can communicate the odor of plants, carcasses, pellets, eggs, snares, live animals, hibernacula, dens, nests, diseases, viruses, pollutants, then we're good to go. But communicating that odor can be trickier than you might think. So, phases of the game. The game is fairly straightforward, but there are distinct nuances that are critical and often overlooked. This game ultimately translates to a massive treasure hunt, and you learned about the first step, but what about the in-between? So the next step is for them to let us know they found it. So the next time they sniff the scat, we tell them to sit. The moment their butt hits the ground, boom! The ball appears again. So now they know, hey, every time I sniff this poop, all I have to do is let them know by sitting, and my ball appears. And so we repeat over and over and over. The next steps are critical. So let's say Filson is going to do cougar work. If we teach him that cougar scat is magic with only one scat, he might not be able to generalize enough to find more. He might just think that the one scat we put out is the magic scat. So now we need to place out cougar scats from other individuals, ideally juvenile, adult, male, and female, and even different seasonal diets. Once Filson understands that we want cougar scats from multiple individuals, then we can start hiding them from plain sight. This encourages Filson that he needs to sniff out the sample, then alert to it. So the most important step that is often overlooked is that we need to introduce wild, untouched samples. That means we haven't placed that out there for them. This makes it difficult because researchers will say, well, if I knew where the scats were, I wouldn't need dogs. But what we do is we go to a hotspot area where they're most likely to be, where we can find scat. We go out with the dogs. The dogs will check out those scats out there because they're very similar to the cougar scats that we have placed. And they'll say, do you want this? Maybe a little bit more questioning, and we reward. So we're able to say, yep, what you're looking for is exactly right. And that's when we know the dogs are really locked on and they're ready to go for a full-scale study. So during training and odor introduction, we actually play different games with the dogs just to mix it up a little and also kind of pulls out certain qualities that we want for the dogs while they're doing the search. Here's a game we play with the dogs. The wall has around 200 holes. We hide the target behind one of the holes, and then the dogs have to find it.
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it.
I love this music. A few things I like to highlight when we look at this video is their independence. So we have worked in the backcountry, in cities, in waterways, and even on water. We do international work, but we're extremely hesitant in conducting it. It means finding transportation we're comfortable with, getting permits, vaccines, and then upholding our rigorous standard of living conditions for the dogs when we're in a different culture that maybe doesn't understand the importance of canine health and safety. As shelters become more popular in different countries, we are keen to be able to utilize dogs that are native to that country. Because remember, the dog is the easier part as long as they have the right human. But there are limitations to this work. Detection dogs are not the answer to every problem, and I'll get to that in a little bit. We've already touched on this, but the biggest misconceptions in conducting scent detection surveys is that the dogs need to be from a line of working dogs. What we have found is that as long as the dogs have a great ball drive, they can learn how to do the work quite quickly. Buying trained detection dogs. Again, we've touched on this too. Whether a pet or a working dog, every time we interact with our dogs, we're communicating with them. How we stand, the tone of our voice, the action we use to accompany a command, the energy we even put out affects the dogs. If a new person is expected to work a trained dog, things may not pan out great. It's similar to having a complex piece of machinery that requires fine-tune adjustments. If you give someone a one-page instruction sheet, they may get the concept, but to maintain the machine and produce high-end work, that person really needs to get to know the ins and outs of that machine. So detection team variabilities, whether it's probability or detection distance, often statisticians want to quantify a team's performance. And that's because they've done that with human visual surveyors. Wildlife work is difficult, and so trying to pull as much of that information out as possible is important. They can easily place a mock scenario to test a person's ability to see a sample in varying habitat. But because the dogs are so dependent on environmental conditions, which includes humidity, air pressure, wind speed, and direction, how topography changes a scent cone, how stinky the target is, it's nearly impossible to replicate this for a mock scenario. With all wildlife work, utilizing a tool and recognizing its limitations is really important. Last, a lot of people are concerned that the dogs will chase the target animal or disturbed wildlife. While the dogs are off leash, they wear bear bells to let wildlife know we're in the area. The ball is also the dog's primary drive, so the human can appropriately handle a situation and use the ball to redirect the dog's attention. Scooby, who's pictured on this slide, was in Africa sitting at a cheetah scat and waiting for his person to come up to him. Behind him was a bull elephant. She could not go up to Scooby until the bull elephant vacated the area. He was not disturbed by Scooby whatsoever, but her guide thought that if they went up to reward Scooby, it could spook the elephant. So Scooby patiently waited, and as the elephant moved through, doing what it normally does, Jennifer, who is also pictured in this photo, was able to reward Scooby. So now that you have a little bit of how it works, I'd like to share a little bit about our program. Rogue Detection Teams was started by 8 people, all from different states and with a variety of degrees. But as we developed the mission, ethos, and vision of our roles in the program, we thought, well, handlers, it kind of works, and field scientists and instructors, but we just thought we would develop our own title. So why did we develop a name for ourselves? It's because we're nerds. No, I'm only joking. Well, kind of. In this line of work, a dog handler is a common title, but what we have tried to share over the years is that we aren't looking for someone who can ask their dog for tricks or do a focused search of a locker similar to a narcotics detection dog. We move through a dynamic landscape, interpreting what the environment is doing, utilizing our knowledge of the target animal to bring our partners into that area where the animal is likely to mark. So when we tried to rebrand this role, we found the word bounder, which this definition worked pretty well. We bound in all sorts of places, tundras, deserts, and jungles. Then we got a good laugh at this one because, well, it's a little true, but not so great for marketing. Ultimately, the ethos of our program makes us bound to these 4 components. The core is that we are bound to our dogs. I could go on about how amazing they are, but we really have so much to cover. We are bound to the science, the lifestyle, and the work that goes into this methodology. Working the way we do, We strive to accomplish conservation goals that protect the land and animals that we are all bound to. Last, we are bound to share the work that we have learned. This method has grown in popularity, and we strive to be a resource to help people avoid mistakes and forgo having to reinvent the wheel when implementing this work. So here's our core that we are bound to, a bunch of rogues, rapscallions, misfits that were all shelter dogs at one point. As you can tell, there's no one size fits all when it comes to doing detection dog work. All of these dogs have one thing in common, and that is their drive to play fetch. So our ethos really resonates in our definition of a bounder, but to reiterate what our program holds to be most important is that we strive to take the time to invest in our bounders, and we utilize shelter dogs. We feel these two ingredients makes for a more approachable cost for detection dog work while maintaining the rigors of scientific work. Most importantly, we are here to share what we've learned. There are a few programs throughout the world that have really hit the nail on the head in identifying this type of work is very difficult to conduct on your own, and having a community and sharing resources is only going to better this methodology and in turn get more successful teams out there, which means rescuing more dogs, and we get to solve complex solutions to pressing conservation issues much faster. So here's a little bit of what we do as a program. We offer collaborative research. A lot of wildlife work has been designed for human searchers. It has been our priority to help researchers understand the strengths and the weaknesses of the detection dog methodology. We strive to provide researchers with the knowledge on how to best use the dogs and the power of their nose. We offer data collection. Once we help communicate the optimal survey design, we provide teams to complete this work, which can be utilized for environmental impact assessments, which might be required at the development of a wind facility or in logging operations. We have been a part of settlement cases where a lawsuit involved has to evaluate the impact of a certain pollution event, and we have been used for Endangered Species Act litigation. The next thing we offer is bounder development. So bounders typically go through a 2-week boot camp, complete a 1-month course at the facility, then experience a 1-month shadow program in the field, which gets wrapped up into a 6-month apprenticeship position. It primarily focuses on philosophy and conceptualizing scenarios. So again, this isn't just kind of a casual field work job. Last, we conduct community outreach. Published papers are great and the science is so important, but it doesn't connect the community to the pressing conservation issues. We have found that the dogs are an amazing bridge between science and community involvement. Who do we work with? Well, it's as simple as universities, nonprofits, private companies, and government organizations. Here are some of the groups that we have worked with in the past 2 years. So I'd like to talk to you a bit about our proof of concept ideas to show you that just because the dogs understand the game, it doesn't mean that each project goes off without a hitch. We are constantly problem solving in how to better communicate the odor to the dogs. So each project has its own set of obstacles and limitations. The first and most obvious limitation is understanding the odor better. So in this example, if the dogs are smelling for diseased trees, are they smelling the pathogen itself? Are they smelling hormones that the tree is giving off? Are they smelling something else entirely that we don't know? Those are important things that we need to consider. If we communicate the odor correctly, now what's a practical application? So when conducting caterpillar and butterfly work, the dogs can alert to the caterpillar scat, which is the size of pepper flakes, but it's so small that there's no way for the human to find it in the field, which means we need to trust the dogs. But we can also use other cues to clue in to the immediate vicinity to confirm that presence of that animal. Third, and almost equally important is considering environmental conditions. If it's too hot to work through the day at a wind facility, we have found that we need to wake up at 2 a.m. Yes, the dogs can work in hotter temperatures, but their efficiency decreases and their safety becomes a huge concern. Logistics are always a limitation. If humans can't physically move through the habitat because of size restriction, there's Pips and I, in overgrown terrain. How can teams successfully conduct surveys? So, a fascinating pilot study that involved Rita and Rogue Hera, our Portuguese contingent, involves the Crow Plain grasshopper, and they're trying to assess, is it efficient for dogs to locate small moving targets?
Sit. Sit.
So not all surveys are hiking great distances. Some are slow and methodical. This team was tasked to be able to pinpoint a live, quick to move target. Traditionally, humans would walk in the grasslands and try and count these grasshoppers. Here, Hera alerts, but now Rita has to locate the now moving target and asks Hera to help. What Hera started realizing was that when she alerted, the grasshopper would then bounce away. And as a predatory defense, the grasshopper actually leaves the most amount of odor from where they bounce from. So the predator would then stick in that area. Here, Hera has found the grasshopper. One of my most recent studies that I did with Sky brought us to Yosemite National Park. This study has been ongoing since 2019 and involves multiple survey methodologies throughout the year and an extensive genetic component. The goals of this study includes mountain lions, Sierra Nevada red foxes, and the fisher. This work is a collaborative effort between UC Davis, Oregon State University, Yosemite, and Rogue detection teams. This was one of the few studies in which researchers pointedly asked us for the detection dog methodology insight during the development of this study. So the objectives of this project was to include estimating the abundance, occupancy, and habitat associations using a combination of scat surveys and camera traps. So they used multiple methods, which is awesome. With mountain lions specifically, they were trying to determine the population size and distribution in the park. They knew they were there. But the Sierra Nevada red fox is a montane species of red fox, whereas it is believed that only 40 individuals remain. The project sought to document the presence of the Sierra Nevada red fox in the park, determine park-wide distribution, and then estimate its population size. Then with that data, they were actually going to use it for the Sierra Nevada Red Fox Conservation Strategy, which is a multi-state program to hopefully preserve this unique animal into the future. So for red fox specifically, their niche habitat was at 12,000 foot passes or so. So can we get in there with a dog? If we can we pack 5 weeks worth of human food, dog food, and supplies without even caching? And what do we do in an emergency? So this ultimately led to, well, we need to backpack. That means we're backpacking with the dogs at high elevation. We need to consider altitude sickness. We need to make sure that we maintain their pads because injuries over rough terrain can put a team out very quickly. We need to prep. People were telling us we're now ready to prep for a 3-month through hike because that's what we had to prepare for the dogs, ourselves, and for collecting scats. And we required the help of porters. So the amazing staff and volunteers in Yosemite National Park would hike all of that gear out to us, meet us, drop it off, and then hike all the way back out. This was our home base. We conducted everything from a tent, and we had bear canisters throughout the park. We had to process the data in the backcountry. We had to maintain our priorities, which was making sure the dogs were warm, safe, and healthy, or kept cool in the early summer months. And we had to make sure we could safely assess the access. So whether areas in the first season, it was too snowy. And in the second season that we went, wildfire was a huge concern. So in year 1, from the 3 months we conducted this work, 50 scats came back and amplified as cougar. From those samples, UC Davis was able to assign unique genetic IDs and determined that there were 25 individuals in that sampling of the Yosemite population. So on the left, you'll see a photo of a classic cougar scat. From that DNA, they were able to create this preliminary map, which shows the population and was able to hone in on individuals. So you can see some red squares here. That squares represented females, circles represented males. So you can see another large distribution of one female throughout the park as well. So currently, geneticists are unable to identify the age of an individual from the scat that we collect, right? So you can't say, oh, from the scat sample, we can tell that this cougar is a 5-year-old individual. So that's where the cameras will shed more light on the details of this population. This type of collaboration through different institutions and methodologies will only help create a stronger narrative for the future of conservation work. And I must say, working in the park, it was very difficult using detection dogs because they do want to preserve the wilderness, and that means not having dogs in the park. We hiked out, and by we, I mean the porters helped us hike out all of the dogs' poop, so we never left their poop in the field. We also had them on leash at any point when there was any kind of wildlife sighting, and we also did a lot of outreach with the community, letting them know what we were doing in the park. So thank you all for taking interest in the work we do. I honestly could go on for hours, so keeping to a 30-minute limit is always a challenge. If you have any questions at all about the work we do, don't hesitate to reach out. We have all the social media accounts in the world. Maybe not, but we've got a lot of them, and they're pretty cool. So again, reach out, and thank you again for listening to our presentation. Hopper, and Rita will show you. But what Hera started doing on her own was that she would work into the area but not pinpoint it. She would sit and wait for Rita to come because she knew the grasshopper would move. So then Hera was able to identify, if I don't pinpoint this exactly, I can wait, and when Rita comes up, that grasshopper will move, and then I'll be able to show her. Independence. Once the dogs get the games, it's a very independent search. Some sessions can take 3 minutes. That's a lot of holes. And I also like the adaptability. The board adds dimension and encourages the dogs to use the full extent of their physical ability to conduct this search. This apparatus and others can be really useful to introduce odors that don't have a consistent substrate, like toxins or diseases. Comes in to how a detection team can be so successful. So are you ready for the #1 trade secret in doing this work? All right, Nelson, I think we got enough. He's frothing a little bit at the mouth. He's quivering and trembling for the ball. He just wants you to throw his ball. So that's the kind of drive that we're looking for. That over and over and over nonstop. And to the point that we have to manage the dog's energy because we don't want them to get hurt.